Yep, that
Okay.
was how it ended. And
Okay.
they did what was right in their own eyes. The end.
Exactly. So I want to ask you, what were your thoughts about that, or what are your thoughts now that we have left that?
Still the same for me. You heard my reaction last week. I was just like, this is a bad Lifetime movie. Like, I don't understand. It's just gonna be the cycle will continue and continue and continue. And in 2022, the cycle is continuing. We are still doing what we feel like is right in our own eyes as a people, which really is not getting us anywhere. We're still looking for leaders to guide us, and we have our ultimate leader the whole time with us who just wants our attention. um it's nothing new, unfortunately. I feel like I'm still living in the book of Judges in 2022.
Mhm.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
True.
And so when we think about some of the things that we want to do, because we do, I mean, and I'm more asking than telling, but also maybe I should say, do we find ourselves doing whatever seems right in our own eyes?
Yeah, we do. Oh, I do.
Yeah, I do. Still do. And do we find that sometimes we could justify doing what we seem right, think saying that, well, God will be pleased, or this is what God will want? Or do you feel a conviction once you read this word? It's like if we don't know the word, there's no conviction, right? If you don't really know it for yourself, then you're not responsible for what you know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Conviction. I feel.
Mhm.
Yeah. When I do, if I was like for me, I had a situation and I said something to someone, and I went back to the Lord and said, Lord, if I was wrong, Lord, forgive me. I asked him to forgive me because I was uncomfortable about it. I said, well, and even though I was in it, like corrected, I didn't get nasty with him. My sister-in-law, she's in a resident home and they tried to keep her out for 3 years already. She was in the they had, because of the pandemic, they kept them home from the program, but now they kept her in there and I had to fight to get in there. So I called up the Bronx Borough president, and I got them to help me to get her back in there. So they got upset. So she had some little words to me. She was saying some things to me, and I just stood up, And even just a little while ago, I was in the clinic with her. And she was saying to me, and you said this, and I said, yes, I said it. And I was asking God to forgive me for even interacting with that. And then I told her, I don't want to talk to you no more. But I was saying, God, even if I was wrong for me even doing that, I asked him to forgive me. I felt convicted, but I felt bad. And I didn't want, I had to tell her, please don't send it because I was afraid that I was going to have some little of joy self come out. And I was going to carry on inside the hospital. That's what she was trying to get me to do because she was upset because she got they got called out and everything they did. She mad now because I called up. They 3 years she been in that place and she wasn't going outside either. And so I had to fight for them to get in there. And we had a little, and I asked God to forgive me because I was a little, I kind of like was arguing back. Then something told me, and I tried to cut off and tell her I don't want to talk no more.
And we do that. It's easy to, like what Joy said, you come out. It's a natural thing for me to come out. It's a natural thing for us to come out. What we've been accustomed to, what we might perceive as a threat or a situation that we don't want to be in, something that makes us uncomfortable, and we have our natural responses, right? Um, and that could be one of the reasons why, the people of Israel at that time, and this is just my speculation, one of the reasons why they probably felt more comfortable with seeking out the little g gods or wanting someone over them, because we tend to fall in line with the people or fall under the people that is most comforting to us. And see, God's way is not comforting to us, right? And so we can really, we have to be careful because we can easily fall under a leadership when we're seeking, okay? that makes us comfortable. Like for example, if you grew up going to church wearing, suits and dresses, and that's not something that you're comfortable with. And so if you go to a church and you realize that, these people dress up every single Sunday, and I don't want to dress up, or I don't have the means to dress up, you might find that you don't go, or you go into you visit another church and they allow you to wear, sweatsuits or dress, come as you are. And it's like, oh, I feel more comfortable here, And so now, because I don't have to get up and I don't have to put on this, my Sunday's best necessarily, I'm going to go where I feel comfortable. And we have to be very careful, because we could find ourselves in those comfortable places. And while we might be comfortable in our skin, we have to make sure that we're comfortable in the word. And being comfortable in the word, you have to still discern whether your comfortability is the word ain't really penetrating me, and so I don't feel conviction, or am I comfortable in the fact that I know that they are speaking God's truth, no matter how it makes me feel. And so we have to be very mindful of those things. We can find ourselves in places that are appealing more to our flesh and appealing more to what we want to do. And I would just venture to say that could have been one of the reasons why we don't know we want God's direct leadership. Think about it when you're at work. How is it when the supervisor's not there? Don't we all like it when a supervisor's not there? Or even if we're under supervision and the supervisor's the one that deal with management, or the supervisor's the one that deal with administration, we're not the ones who have to deal with those people, and all of that is comfortable. And even if we have a real cool supervisor, a real good administrator, think about it. When the people who run the place or own the place come to visit, don't even that cooler supervisor change up a little bit? Don't they straighten up a little bit or do more than they usually do? Why? Because the people who are really in charge are watching. So now imagine being in a place where you got to work under that type of watchfulness. I hope that's a word, but that type of watchfulness all the time. And so when we start talking about, just being right, having God and following God, that's really huge. Like we say, I got God all the way and I want God to just be my God and do that. But are we at that point? You got to question yourself. Are you at that point that if you say it's just gonna be me and God, that you have reached a level of maturity to where you might be uncomfortable where you are, that you will feel that conviction more times than not, being under a different leader. Because it doesn't matter how good a leader is, they're not God. They are not God. They'll still have their beliefs, they'll still have their ways, they'll still have their version of the word. Okay, good, bad, or indifferent. But with God, there's like no cut cards. Okay, there are no cut cards, because when he puts that conviction in you, I promise you that's something like, with the example that Joy gave, it just makes you feel uncomfortable. It makes you feel completely uncomfortable. And so in that regard, I can get that. I can get that. So I want you to think about it like that. What is it like, you know, having supervision as opposed to reporting directly to the big boss, and then having that type of oversight. And that's what it is. And it does come with a certain level of maturity. And we've seen what was supposed to be a growth process. We've seen what was supposed to be a maturing process. We've seen where God has taken the people of Israel and he brought them out of slavery, and he was trying to teach them about who he was, but he also gave them people, two different types of leaders, having Moses and then having Joshua, and they just were not ready. They just were not ready. And a lot of us in 2022, like we said, we're going through things because, we're just still not ready. But
And I want to say one more thing that in that, right? And then I came home just a little while And I thank God because it could have got bad, and I could have had went out and I sinned, really sinned, and said some things that could have really escalated to a bad thing. And I came here and I was so happy, like knowing I have to get on the line now. I was just so I said, thank you, Lord, that I just let I had and I felt conviction about asking forgiveness. I said, Lord, I'm so grateful. Could have went somewhere else. I'm telling you. And then guess what? The supervisor called me up a little while ago and said hi. She said Gloria be starting her program on Monday. I said, okay, thank you. You see that? You see?
Yeah.
Man, sorry for cutting in, but I just
Oh, no, it's fine. No, it's fine. I appreciate you sharing, but God has the way He will work it out, and sometimes we do have to surrender. And then it's a good thing too, because just recognizing that some of these challenges really might be to test our growth, test our maturity level. If we don't get tested in a certain way, we might not know what's still in us. We could say, "Oh, I'm delivered from this. I'm delivered from these responses." And that's until something happened, you black out, then you kirk out, and you be like, okay, well, maybe I wasn't as delivered as I thought that I was.
Yep.
Yeah, Katrina say, yep. But it does happen. We could
I
actually,
just heard her say, yep, yeah.
yeah, and it happens. You don't know until you get to that place, and then you're like, oh man,
Oh my damn.
oh
That ain't
man.
no good feeling either. I'm telling you, it's not. Yeah.
No, it's not a good feeling, but it's that reminder. And we think back to Peter, right? Y'all remember when we went through this Peter, and just thinking about Peter was like, I'm the man, like he's been walking with Christ all of this time. And he's like, yeah, okay, Peter, I hear you, but by the time this, the rooster crow, you're gonna be done denied me 3 times. And oh no, I would never would. But what did he do? No, I don't know him. No, never heard of him. No, I'm not that guy. Like he did it, but then he realized, and it wasn't until that root that he's like, oh my goodness, I didn't know that I still have this in me. And there are some things that we have in us, and so we will go through some things to show us, because trust me, if you're not tested in something, you could believe that you have all the knowledge in the world. Oh, I know enough. Y'all know how I feel about putting that Bible up under your arm just to show the world, how much you know. But it's not until you put it down and you really gotta go through something that could have you putting that religion on the shelf, not just the Bible. And then it's like you see what your foundation is made of when you go through that fire. And it's okay. You will grow. We will get to areas. We will see that. And that's one of the things that I loved about that book and Judges. And so that was my, one of my takeaways from it. And so if anybody else, if unless somebody else has something, we are actually going to be starting in the Book of Ruth today. And I'm excited. I'm excited for something different. Y'all excited? Because I'm excited for something different.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead, get started, and share my screen. And give me a second. All right. So the Book of Ruth, and we are going to be doing the New Living Translation. Okay. And so it says, Ruth 1, and the days when the judges ruled in Israel, a severe famine came upon the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah left his home and went to live in the country of Moab, taking his wife and 2 sons with him. The man's name was Elimelech, and his wife was Naomi, and their 2 sons were Mahlon and Kilion. They were Eph, Etherites from Bethlehem in the land of Judah, and when they reached Moab, they settled there. When Elimelech died and Naomi was left with her 2 sons, the 2 sons married Moabite women. One married a woman named Orpha, and the other married a woman named Ruth. But about 10 years later, both Mahlon and Kilion died. This left Naomi alone with her son, without her sons or her husband. Then Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had blessed his people in Judah by giving them good crops again. So Naomi and her daughters-in-law got greedy, got ready. What's wrong with my reading today? Bless me, Lord. Okay, let me start verse 6 over. Then Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had blessed his people in Judah by giving them good crops again. So Naomi and her daughters in law got ready to leave Moab to return to her homeland. With her two daughters in law, she set out from the place where she had been living, and they took the road that would lead them back to Judah. By the way, but on the way, Naomi said to her two daughters in law, go back to your mother's homes, and may the Lord reward you for your kindness to your husbands and to me. May the Lord bless you with the security of another marriage. Then she kissed them goodbye, and they all broke down and wept. No, they said, we want to go with you to your people. But Naomi replied, why should you go on with me? Can I still give birth to other sons who could grow up to be your husbands? No, my daughters, return to your parents' home, for I am too old to marry again. And even if it were possible, and I were to get married tonight and bear sons, then what? Would you wait for them to grow up and refuse to marry someone else? No, of course not, my daughters. Things are far more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord himself has raised his fist against me. And again, they wept together. And Orpah kissed her mother in law goodbye, but Ruth clung tightly to Naomi. Look, Naomi said to her, your sister in law has gone back to her people and to her gods. You should do the same. But Ruth replied, don't ask me to leave you and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord punish me severely if I allow anything but death to separate us. When Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she said nothing more. So the two of them continued on their journey. When they came to Bethlehem, the entire town was excited by their arrival. Is it really Naomi? The women asked. Don't call me Naomi, she responded. Instead, call me Mara, for the Almighty has made life very bitter for me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me home empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has caused me to suffer, and the Almighty has sent such tragedy upon me? So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by her daughter in law, the young Moabite woman. They arrived in Bethlehem in late spring at the beginning of the barley harvest. And so, what are your first thoughts from that first chapter of Ruth? Anybody?
She was committed.
Mm-hmm.
I
Absolutely.
see commitment. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
She
definitely committed.
and she was willing to give up her own, even though she was a Moabite, she was ready to give up her own religion to take on the Israelite, follow the people of Israel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. That was, thank you so much, Ms. Hunter. She was definitely committed, definitely committed. And we saw a sacrifice in there. Like Ms. Punter said, she was willing to give up her own just to follow her, even if that meant the opportunity for her to remarry, for her to have a child, for her to go back to her parents' home and worship her God. She was very committed. So that was an excellent point. Anybody have anything to add to that? What about the state that we find Naomi in? We talk a lot about Ruth, but what about where Naomi was at that time, even mentally?
Sound like she thought, like she felt like God turned his back on her, or like based on like the passing of her, like her husband, her sons,
Yeah. She was definitely in a funky place, right? She definitely felt like God had turned her back, and rightfully so, because when we really think about it, she lost a lot. She lost her husband, she lost her two sons. Like she said, that's looking like she's never even gonna have, like, her family's over at that point. because like she said, even if she was to get married and have more, like she would have to live through her child growing up to marry one of the girls. And for her, she just kind of felt that it was over. you know I mean, is that likely that somebody would feel that way?
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, when we think about it, hopefully we don't have to experience anything like she do, but we tend to feel like God might have turned his back on us for less, for losing less. Can anybody attest to that? Have you ever just lost something, a friend, maybe a job, or just something, and then just felt like God must have really turned his back on me. He must be punishing me. He must be doing something because I found myself in this place. And
Yeah.
then, I'm sorry, did you want to say more?
Yeah. Some of the things, like you were saying, some of the things I guess that we go through aren't even um like the loss of a loved one. Like, she's lost three.
Mhm.
And sometimes I freak out when I'm, this is gonna sound weird, when I'm close to E and I can't get to the gas station in time or something. I know it sounds crazy, but I'd be like, what is going on? I can't get there.
Mhm. No, that's not crazy at all. I think that's not crazy. In either way, whether it's literally like I'm not sure what's about to happen if I'm gonna make it to my, to get gas. And then even what about when we're just on E in life and it just feel like whatever we have, we're not gonna be able to make it to the next destination. Your E could be money. What if you were down to that last dollar, if you even have that, if you even have that, that lasts anything, that lasts whatever it could be, and you don't know where your next is coming from. You don't know if you could make it to when that next is gonna come, and for some people they go through that often, repeatedly, and so you have that feeling over and over again. I don't know how I could make it. And that's the times that sometimes the only way is because you got to look back and say, I always had. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the feeling goes away. There must be something that Naomi showed Ruth when things were good about her God, for her to have faith even still in her God, for her to say, you know, where's that part? She says, don't ask me to leave and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. It had to be something that Naomi has shown Ruth throughout their time for her to say, wherever you go is worth me being there, no matter what it looks like now. No matter what it looks like now, because we have a lot of offers in our life. We have a lot of offers that be like, oh, okay, well, I see you ain't got nothing going on over here, especially for me. So I'm back. I'm out of here. Don't we have these offers in our life?
Yep.
But that boiled down to also she showed trust. She didn't know how she was going to end up, but she trusted God. She trusted his promises, his laws, and all of that. So she felt reassured.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she did. She felt reassured, and it had to be something that God has done in the past for her to trust him, or it had to be something she's had to see. And not to say that some of us don't have it, but it's something. And sometimes that is the thing that we have to hold on to when we don't have anything else. And I'm going to use that, Katrina, I'm gonna probably use it often when we're on E and we don't know if we're going to make it to, be able to fill up again. It had to be something. God had to show you that he will bring you through and he will get you to that next phase. And even if you're still riding on E, in the meanwhile, sometimes we have to look back and know that we have made it. Sometimes that's how we allow ourselves to get to E, okay? Because we have been, and if we're going to use gas as an example, if you are a person and you travel the same route every day, you kind of already know how many miles you could squeeze out of that tank, right? You can it's the same thing if you go grocery shopping and you look and you don't have a lot of food, but you could kind of almost estimate like how many more days or how many more meals can this last me? Okay, how far can I go? And it's not a comfortable place. And sometimes we don't even realize that we're pushing ourselves to that limit. But if you just holding on because you realize that somehow, some way, this is not going to last forever, I might be panicking. I might not know what's going to happen, but I have to sit back and I have to reflect on the fact that God has brought me through this sometime before. This God, he has brought me through this sometime before. And that is even if in this moment, even if in this moment Naomi can't see it, Ruth has seen it. And we thank God for the Ruth in her life because Ruth is standing firm by her. And I thank God for the people who are in our lives that, will stand by us. Hopefully, we have at least one person in our life that will stand by us and still be there for us, even when times are down, or to encourage us, or to just have faith in God when we can't have it for ourselves. And one of the things that I really love about this story is because, and you guys know I like to put things into, real life situations. I remember when I was going through, it was shortly after I was licensed, and when I was going through stuff at my former employer, and I just remember my friends, because they saw me moving up in ministry, they saw me start in the ministry, they saw me get licensed, and it looked like I was really um accepting my call and just accepting where God had me in life. And then it was like soon as I did that, all hell broke loose. And one of the concerns that I had was that I didn't want to be like a poor representation of what trusting God would look like. And so what I meant by that is I didn't want my friends to necessarily see me struggling because I didn't want it to reflect on God. I didn't want them to, like, how could you be this Christian and yet you suffering? How could you be this Christian and then you're unemployed? How could you be this Christian? Well, where's God now? Where's your God? It almost seemed like the more you focus on God and the more you get closer to God, it seemed like the more you were suffering. And I was so afraid in that particular time that they would not want to worship the Lord, or they would not want to know more about Christ themselves because they probably wouldn't want to go through what I was going through. Because at that time, it felt like there was no good happening in my life because I chose to follow this path. And I was really concerned. I didn't express it to them, but I was really concerned that, I was just a poor reflection. And I remember when God finally dealt with me with that, and I remember God like pretty making it pretty clear that he didn't need my help. Those were my thoughts, those were my ways. I had no idea what he was doing. And these two friends, which was my friends Kia and Tiffany, we would still get together once a month. And while I'm sitting here thinking that they seeing a suffering, they're not seeing a suffering. They're actually seeing a blessing. If anything, they're seeing more of God in my life because of the suffering that I was going through than I could have ever tried to portray or try to reflect, because they saw that I was never without. They saw that even without a job, that I was still able to pay bills. They saw God give me things that I could never imagine, even if I didn't want them. They saw where God took me from. They saw healing happen in my life. They saw provisions being made in my life. They saw God in an awesome way, in a way that I never could expect. And all of that came through my suffering. They were able to see God because he was made perfect in my weakness. And that's what they saw. And so a lot of times we like to really put on a show for people about who God is. And I know in the Bible study, we've had this discussion before where we say, you know, when people, like if you go to people and be like, well, how are you doing? Well, I'm blessed and highly favored. And after we start reading, remember when we was going through the book of Genesis and we saw what a blessed man had to go through, and it's like, you blessed, but what's that mean? Because the blessed people of God, they were the ones who were suffering. So when people sit there and say that they're blessed and highly favored, they're not trying to tell you that I'm sitting here, I'm sick and I'm suffering and, you know, I'm crying at night. No, they're trying to portray an image most often that I got things all together, that God is blessing me, that things are so good and I got everything in control. And that's what we think that blessings are. And that's not necessarily what it is, because at the end of the day, for a lot of us, when things are going good, we ain't really thinking about God like that. We ain't praying as hard. We ain't thinking about him as hard, you know, and don't let it be something that we think we're getting on our own, because that's more where our focus is than anything else. And so we're probably not even, I mean, we're talking about him, but we're just talking about that goodness, but we're not really talking about those things that where he's really able to show up in our lives. We're doing a lot of stuff for show. And so I love this thing. I love Ruth saying that, no, I'm still going to follow your God. I'm still going to follow him. She lost her husband. She lost what she thought her future was going to be. And she still had faith and she still followed God. A lot of us don't have what Ruth had. See, when we talk about Ruth a lot, or the book of Ruth, or the story of Ruth, you know, I hear most women talk about Boaz, you know, like that was the prize. But Ruth was already blessed right here, because Ruth is nothing to get a husband for a lot of people. I hate to say it. A lot of people have husband now. What they worth, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how happy you are, you know, but it's not a lot to get a husband. You know what I'm trying to say? That's not it right there. But she had God first. And the husband was a consolation like prize. But no, she had God. The blessing didn't come at the chapter 4. The blessing was in chapter 1. And she already had that, because something happened in Ruth's life while she was living with Naomi, that she saw God and she knew who he was. And she was in a place that most of us are not going to go, that I'm going to sit here on this side of suffering and I'm still going to follow you, God. And it's not whether she get a husband or not, because truth be told, a lot of women are in this, and you think that, okay, now I'm a Christian, now with my husband. Okay? We're not in it for Boaz. We're in it for God. Because you're really going to need God to get through the marriage anyway. Because if you really know what marriage is like, you better have God.
Amen.
God.
Amen. Oh boy, tell you.
Okay? So she already had it. Any thoughts before we move on? All right. So if y'all excited like me to go on to chapter 2, okay, here we go. And so now, chapter 2, now there was a wealthy and influential man in Bethlehem named Boaz, who was a relative of Naomi's husband, Elimelech. One day, Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go out into the harvest fields to pick up the stalks of grain left behind by anyone who is kind enough to let me do it." Naomi replied, "All right, my daughter, go ahead." So Ruth went out to gather grain behind the harvesters. And as it happened, she found herself working in a field that belonged to Boaz, the relative of her father-in-law, Elimelech. While she was there, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. "The Lord be with you," he said. "The Lord bless you," the harvesters replied. Then Boaz asked his foreman, "Who is that young woman over there? Who does she belong to?" And the foreman replied, "She is the young woman from Moab who came back with Naomi. She asked me this morning if she could gather grain behind the harvesters. She had been hard at work ever since, except for a few minutes rest in the shelter. Boaz went over there and said to Ruth, listen, my daughter, stay right here with us until you gather grain. Don't go to any other fields. Stay right here behind a young woman working in my field. See which part of the field they're harvesting and then follow them. I have warned the young men not to treat you roughly. And when you are thirsty, help yourself to the water they have drawn from the well. Ruth fell at his feet and thanked him warmly. What have I done to deserve such kindness? She asked. I am only a foreigner. Yes, I know, Boaz replied, but I also know everything about what you've done for your mother in law since the death of your husband. I have heard how you left your father and mother in your own land to live here among complete strangers. May the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge, reward you fully for what you have done. Sir, I hope to continue to please you, sir, she replied. You have comforted me by speaking so kindly to me, even though I'm not one of your workers. At mealtime, Boaz called to her, come over here and help yourself to some food. You can dip your bread in a sour wine. So she sat with his harvesters, and Boaz gave her some roasted grain to eat. She ate all she wanted and still had some left over. When Ruth went back to work again, Boaz ordered his young men, let her go, let her gather grain right among the sheaves without stopping her and pull out some heads of barley from the bundles and drop them on purpose for her. Let her pick them up and don't give her a hard time. So Ruth gathered barley there all day and she beat out the grain that evening. It filled an entire basket. She carried it back into town and showed it to her mother in law. Ruth also gave her the roasted grain that was left over from her meal. Where did you gather all of this grain today? Naomi asked. Where did you work? May the Lord bless the one who helped you. So Ruth told her mother in law about the man whose field she had worked. She said, the man I work with today is named Boaz. May the Lord bless him, Naomi told her daughter in law. He is showing his kindness to us as well as to your dead husband. That man is one of our closest relatives, one of our family redeemers. Then Ruth said, what's more, Boaz even told me to come back and stay with his harvesters until the entire harvest is completed. Good, Naomi exclaimed. Do as he said, my daughter. Stay with his young women right through the whole harvest. You might be harassed in other fields, but you will be safe with him. So Ruth worked alongside the women in Boaz's field and gathered grain with them until the end of the barley harvest. Then she continued working with them through the wheat harvest in early summer, and all the while she lived with her mother-in-law. And so, what are your thoughts on Ruth chapter 2? What are your first thoughts?
Oh boy.
Or what about Boaz's? What do you think Boaz's? What caught Boaz's eye about Ruth?
I
What?
think he saw her heart
Mm-hmm.
and he saw her, just her character overall,
Mm-hmm.
because it definitely take a big heart and a lot of character to do what she do. Oh, do what she did. And it wasn't never from a selfish standpoint, never was expecting much to come from it. It was just her character and her heart. And I feel like he saw that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. She was definitely genuine. That's right. He saw her character in her heart. She wasn't going there to get anything in particular. She was just following her heart. She was following the Lord. She was being faithful. She was being obedient. She was trying to provide for her and Naomi in the best way that they could. And she worked hard for it, and she worked hard. And that is what he saw. She wasn't doing it to really gain anything from it at that particular point. And what he saw way before she even made it into the field, because he had already heard her reputation preceded her. He already heard about her. He already know what she had done. And so once again, it's not just about what we want to portray to other people. It's not. And sometimes these situations that we find ourselves in, how we respond in these situations is probably pretty crucial for where God is trying to bring us. Had she not gone through everything that she went through, she would not have been able to show who she was in character. Miss Rhonda?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Amber was saying, and to say that she wasn't asking for like special privileges, or to be, for anybody to feel sorry for her. She was trying to, to work hard and to earn it, and take care of herself and her mother-in-law. But she wasn't asking for special treatment.
That's right. She wasn't. And so just being genuine, just being genuine in our intentions. She really just wanted to serve the Lord. She just really wanted to provide. Did you have another question, Miss Rhonda? I saw your hand go back up. Rhonda.
No, I was trying to put it down.
Oh, okay. I have put it down. Sorry. But yeah, and that, I mean, that shows us something about ourselves, just being genuine, just being pure with our intentions. And, because we really never know who's watching, right? And we're not doing it for show, but we never know who's watching. And so, going into chapter 3, one day Naomi said to Ruth, "My daughter, it is time that I found a permanent home for you so that you will be provided for. Boaz is a close relative of ours, and he's been very kind by letting you gather grain with his young women. Tonight he will be winnowing barley at the threshing floor. Now do as I tell you, take a bath, put on perfume, and dress in your nicest clothes. Then go to the threshing floor, but don't let Boaz see you until he has finished eating and drinking. But be sure to notice where he lies down. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down there. He will tell you what to do." "I will do everything you say," Ruth replied. So she went down to the threshing floor that night and followed the instructions of her mother-in-law. After Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he lay down at the far end of the pile of grain and went to sleep. Then Ruth came quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. Around midnight, Boaz suddenly woke up and turned over. He was surprised to find a woman laying at his feet. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am your servant Ruth," he replied. "Spread the corner of your covering for me, for you are my family redeemer." "The Lord bless you, my daughter," Boaz exclaimed. "You are showing even more family loyalty now than you ever did before, for you have not gone after a younger man, whether rich or poor. Now, don't worry about a thing, my daughter. I will do what is necessary, for everyone in town knows that you are a virtuous woman. But while it is true that I am one of your family redeemers, there is another man who is more closely related to you than I am. Stay here tonight, and in the morning I will talk to him. If he is willing to redeem you, very well, let him marry you. But if he is not willing, then as surely as the Lord lives, I will redeem you myself. Now lie down here until the morning." So Ruth lay at Boaz's feet until the morning, but she got up before it was light enough for people to recognize each other. For Boaz had said, "No one must know that a woman was here at the threshing floor." Then Boaz said to her, "Bring your cloak and spread it out." He measured 6 scoops of barley into the cloak and placed it on her back. Then he returned to the town. When Ruth went back to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, "What happened, my daughter?" Ruth told Naomi everything Boaz had done for her, and she added, "He gave me these 6 scoops of barley and said, 'Don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.' Then Naomi said to her, "Just be patient, my daughter, until we hear what happens. The man won't rest until he settles things today." So, any thoughts, any comments on Ruth 3? No? No.
Even though
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people be asking, things of God, but I see that with her, it was like, even though she was being blessed, she still continued to be humble. She continued to be obedient, continue to trust in him. But
Mm-hmm.
some people, they pray when they going through stuff, and as soon as things get good, they forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
But she kept right on the track to, keep trusting the Lord and being humble.
Yeah, she definitely was. And even he said that, even he's seen that. Yeah. And
And also Boaz, also Boaz was still showing that he wasn't taking advantage of her kindness, that she was, still being kind. He didn't take advantage of her kindness. He was still being, grateful to her.
yeah,
And
that could have
yeah,
went either way, right?
yeah,
Mm-hmm. That could have went either way, but he cared about her. He cared about her. He didn't take advantage. He recognized her reputation, her virtue within the community, and he didn't want that to be compromised in any way. And even no matter what his feelings may or may not have been for her at that time, he didn't even take advantage of that because he told her there is a family member who is um a closer relative to you. So really it would be fair and lawful for him to have the opportunity to marry you first. And so he was even willing, even though we could see that he saw the value of Ruth, as a person and saw her character, he was still willing to sacrifice that or what may or may not have been his desires for what was right and what was lawful. Did y'all pick up on that?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. And so
Definitely. It was like a fair thing. Like, I'm gonna be fair about this because and I feel like he also knew like the principles. Again, he had the good character too. Like they say, your like we say, your vibe attract your tribe. So he kind of had character and standards about himself, and you can kind of see that when he did what he did and was like, I'm gonna be fair about this.
mhm,
You know.
mhm,
So I definitely see why a person like him would be attracted to a person like Ruth outside of looks and things like that, and why she would want to be with him outside of, like he said, the youth situation. Like it's like it's not about that. It's just about character and standards that we seem to have for ourselves and for each other.
mhm. And do they seem to be people that's really after God's heart more than their own desires? Both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
So do we see, what that might look like for us, right? Because I don't know about you, but one of the first things that I see with men, would be how they look. Um, that's the first thing. I'm not thinking about, well, dang, he got such a good godly character. That's not the first thing. If anything, that has to be one of those last things. If he really don't look good and you're looking for some reason or some justification, then you might be able to use that good godly character. But it's not necessarily the first thing that you see. And unless I'm wrong. But
no, you're not wrong.
okay,
No, yeah, you gotta look like
Unfortunately,
something. You
okay.
gotta look like a little.
unfortunately, it's
Can't
like
be a
that.
Shrek now. We gotta. The
Yeah.
eyeball got like you a little bit.
Right. That's the first thing. You just gotta at least look that direction, right? And let
Yeah,
me
yeah,
say, I
yeah.
haven't had to look in a long time, thank God. But I'm just saying when I did, right? But no,
Yeah.
But my husband's not a bad looking man. And so that's one of the first things that he is not. He is not. But I promise you, me looking at how he looked came way before, well, what's your relationship with God like? That came first, okay? Me looking at what he looks like. And so, but we see that it is, and there are, like he said, there probably somebody who's younger or whatever else. There were other people, but once again, it's his spirit, and for these two people to really be after the heart of God more, that was really the great character, and there were no real compromises that needed to be made. If anything, you see where both of these people were willing to let it go, or at least him in that particular case. He would be willing to just surrender her and his potential to be with her for what would have been right and lawful. And it's something for us to learn from that, because sometimes when we see something that we want, we see something that look good to us, we don't want to let it go. We don't want someone else to get it. It doesn't have to be right or wrong. We just don't want to let it go. It might not even be good for us, but we definitely ain't trying to lose our chances of getting it. That's what we're not trying to do. You ever think, you could think about it how as deep as you want to think about it. You know what I mean? As deep as you want to think about it. But I'm not really willing to let it go. So it could be something in the store that seems like it's the last pair, or it could be that man, and you don't want to let him go for another woman. You don't want her to have him. And he might not be, whatever, but you definitely don't want to let it go. You don't want to risk it. And so, but he was willing to risk it. He was willing to let it go. He was willing to let her go for what was right and what would have been right in the eyes of the Lord. And that's something to learn. Think about it, because opportunities come our way, things that appeal to us come our way. And this, we're talking about Ruth and Boaz, but this is, remember, this is the living word. I want us to see, how do we apply that in our lives? So if you in a situation, don't just seek out what may look good to you, might feel good to you, and might be what you want. You got to really still go after what it is that God would want and what God would have you to do. Don't worry about the outcome. Don't worry about what you're going to get in the end. That part in that moment is not your concern. Your concern is still doing what is right. What is it that God would have you to do? That's what we get from that. And that's what we need to question, because our eyes are always going to be appealed to something. Our flesh is always going to desire something. But what is it that God would have you to do? Or what is it that you're thinking about holding on to that you don't need to hold on to because it ain't right? And you know that that's not what God wants for you. It's what you want, and let's be honest about it. And if we do what God is saying to do in the moment without looking at the outcome in the future, God is saying do what he's calling you to do, what's right in his eyes. That's it. Make that decision. And that's the only decision to be made in the moment. And so I'm going to just trust God that he wanted that said, because I don't even know where that came from. So anybody else got anything to say? I heard
I do.
Okay.
This story is one that I have heard about even before I got into the word myself, because you always hear people say, oh, especially women, I want me a Boaz. I want me a Boaz. And it's like, I've always heard it from a standpoint of how he loved her, but I've never heard it, and I never knew how we're breaking it down tonight. It's like, I don't just want a Boaz because of how he loved Ruth. You want a Boaz because of his character, of his relationship with God, because all of those things are in line with or without a Ruth.
That's what it say.
So this man, this man is who he is because of his relationship with God. It don't have nothing to do with, Ruth or anything like that. But then it's also I want me a Boaz. But then you ask yourself, are you a Ruth? Like, are you somebody that stands in your relationship without a bow? Like, it's just the individual people who we kind of like, the way we broke the individuals down tonight. It makes sense why they are how they are, and they are kind of the couple of the Bible that everybody want to be. But nobody gets into why they are the couple of the Bible that everybody want to be. So tonight, reading it on my own was one thing, but tonight having us break it down like this, it really makes sense that these two individuals were whole on their own, and they came together and they were hundreds on their own, and they came together and made 200s. So it's kind of dope to think about it like that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And it is. And we tend not to see that because we're not after God's heart. We're after God's hand. What can we get? And it's not about that. We got to develop into who we are in Him. It's not about getting anything. And they were not chasing the hand of God. They were chasing the heart of God. And if that meant letting go and not having whatever it is the world say that they were supposed to have, you could take it. And that's who they were. And so great pointing that out, Amber. Thank you. Miss Rhonda.
I wanted to also speak about the relationship of Ruth and Naomi. That Naomi was looking out for Ruth, and that she wanted her to have, a future. She wanted her to be able to marry again. She just wanted her to be whole. So and then I thought about how Ruth listened to Naomi, the different things, the directions that she gave her. She seemed to listen to it and not really question it. Well, why are you having me do this or that? She just followed. So I just really also zeroed in on their relationship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They did have a really good relationship. And not only that, when you was just saying that, it made me think, because we did focus on Ruth and Boaz and what they wanted, but Naomi has been very selfless in this as well. Naomi has, when she had nothing, she didn't try to hold on to the last thing that she had. She was willing to let it go for Ruth to have a chance. But that was what she thought Ruth would have needed, Ruth and Orpah at that time. But once again, we see that she was willing to sacrifice her own happiness, even in her misery, because once again, some people could be very miserable and they just want, like they say, misery loves company. But she wasn't desiring the company. She did always want to give Ruth that opportunity, and even now with her sending her, like saying, okay, this is time, for you to go to Boaz. Once again, it wasn't for her personal gain, but it was for Ruth. So that is one thing that we're seeing a lot of sacrifice, a lot of self-sacrifice in here, a lot of it, throughout the story. And so even like what Amber said, this is not a story about, getting that husband, that's not what it's ever about. When we started after, what book comes after Genesis, what book came after after the beginning, you go through Exodus, learning about God. Then after you learn about who He is, and have the experiences, what you got to do. I think what comes out Leviticus, right? You start talking about sacrifice. We start talking about sacrifice. And that is something that we have to see: sacrifice, putting down yourself, giving what is good. Remember when we went through the beginning of the book of Leviticus, and knowing that you have to give up something that means something to you, something that is worth it to you, that would be worth it, something that is good for you. And so that is this is a good book and a good example of sacrifice. Um, Anybody have anything else to say before we get into Ruth 4? Okay. And so, Ruth chapter 4, Boaz went to the town gate and took a seat there. Just then, the family redeemer he had mentioned came by. So Boaz called out to him, "Come over here and sit down, friend. I want to talk to you." So they down together. Then Boaz called 10 leaders from the town and asked them to sit as witnesses. And Boaz said to the family redeemer, "You know Naomi, who came back from Moab. Um, she is selling the land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should speak to you about it so that you can redeem it if you wish. If you want the land, then buy it here in the presence of these witnesses. But if you don't want it, let me know right away because I'm next in line to redeem it after you." Then the man replied, "All right, I'll redeem it." Then Boaz told him, "Of course, your purchase of the land from Naomi also requires that you marry Ruth, the Moabite widow. That way she can have children who will carry on her husband's name and keep the land in the family." "Then I can't redeem it," the family redeemer replied, "because this might endanger my own estate. You redeem the land. I cannot do it." Now, in those days, it was the custom in Israel for anyone transferring a right of purchase to remove his sandal and hand it to the other party. This publicly validated the transaction. So the other family redeemer drew off his sandal and said to Boaz, "You buy the land." Then Boaz said to the elders and the crowd standing around, "You are witnesses that today I have brought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon, and with the land I have acquired Ruth, the Moabite widow of Mahlon, to be my wife. This way she can have a son to carry on a family name of her dead husband and to inherit the family property here in his hometown. You are all witnesses today." Then the elders and all the people standing in the gate replied, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make this woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, from whom all the nation of Israel descended. May you prosper in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem, and make the Lord give your descendants by this young woman who will be like those of our ancestors, Perez and the son of Tamar in Judah." So Boaz took Ruth into his home and she became his wife. When he slept with her, the Lord enabled her to become pregnant and she gave birth to a son. Then the woman of the town said to Naomi, "Praise the Lord who has now provided a redeemer for your family. May this child be famous in Israel. May he restore your youth and care for you in your old age. For he is the son of your daughter-in-law who loves you and has been better to you than seven sons." Naomi took the baby and cuddled him to her breast, and she cared for him as if he were her own. The neighbor women said, "Now at last Naomi has a son again," and they named him Obed. He became the father of Jesse and the grandfather of David. This is the genealogical record of their ancestor Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron was the father of Ram. Ram was the father of Aminadab. Aminadab was the father of Nahshon. Nahshon was the father of Salmon. Salmon was the father of Boaz. Boaz was the father of Obed. Obed was the father of Jesse. Jesse was the father of David. And for those of you who know, you know the genealogy goes further down. And so that concludes the book of Ruth. So, what are you guys' final thoughts on chapter 4 or the story of Ruth overall?
I
That,
just think it was a good story overall. It was a good book.
wow. That just hearing now what about Ruth's son is Jesse's father, right? Which was David's father, right?
Mm-hmm.
Never would know that. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah,
That
we had talked about it before because who else is, for those of you share, who else are they related to?
I think isn't that Jesus line?
Mm-hmm.
Judah,
Mm-hmm.
the tribe of Judah. Yeah, that's the part I was getting ready to point out. It's interesting to hear about his ancestors, so to speak, like his relatives and their characters and how that came to be before he was even put placed on earth. So,
Mhm.
but it was, to me, it was a good story following Judges. Judges was stressful. So that little Ruth, the little Ruth little insert there was a good commercial to add into the
Yeah,
book.
yeah. It is like a little break. It is a little break from the intensity, of the word, but the messages that we need are still in there. I'm just gonna bring up real quick for the genealogy. And this is one thing that I haven't had to say it in a while because we haven't gone through genealogy in a while. But when we get to reading the Bible, it's not all an easy pill to swallow. It's not all easy to digest. It's not
Yeah.
always easy to pronounce, understand. It's not, but there's value in it whether we see it right then or not. And so when it comes to the genealogy, I always say try not to bypass it. Might seem redundant and it might not make sense to you at that time, right? But there is history in there. So I just wanted to go to Matthew 1, and Amber had pointed this out sometime back when we were sometime back early in the year. But Matthew 1 talks about the generations of Jesus Christ, and I'm going to go to NLT. And so it says this is the record of the ancestors of Jesus the Messiah, descendant of David and of Abraham. And so Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac was the father of Jacob. Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah was the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron the father of Ram. Ram the father of Aminadab. Aminadab the father of Nahshon. Nahshon the father of Salmon, Salmon, the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab, right? And we read about her. All right. Boaz was the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. Obed was the father of Jesse. Jesse, the father of King David. David was the father of Solomon, whose mother was Bathsheba, the widow of Uriah. Solomon was the father of Rehoboam. Rehoboam, the father of Abijah. Abijah, the father of Asa. Asa was the father of Jehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat was the father of Jeroham. Jeroham was the father of Uzziah. Uzziah, the father of Jotham. Jotham, the father of Ahaz. Ahaz, the father of Hezekiah. Hezekiah, the father of Manasseh. Manasseh, the father of Amnon. Amnon was the father of Josiah. Josiah, the father of Joachim, and his brothers born at the time of exile to Babylon. After the Babylonian exile, Jehoiakim, the father of Shealtiel. Shealtiel, the father of Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel, the father of Abiud. Abiud, the father of Eliakim. Eliakim was the father of Azar. Azor, the father of Zadok. Zadok, the father of Akim. Akim, the father of Eliud. Eliud, the father of Eleazar. Eleazar, the father of Mathan. Mathan was the father of Jacob. Jacob was the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary. Mary gave birth to Jesus. Jesus, who was called the Messiah. And so we see how genealogy plays a part. And one of the things that I love about seeing this genealogy is, as some of what we read, some of what you may have read on your own, when I think about how some of these individuals were conceived and came into the world, and I know that they didn't have the best of stories. When I think about Perez and Zerah and what happened with Tamar for her to have her babies, when I think about who Rahab was, Rahab was that prostitute. Rahab was a spy. She was the mother, of Boaz. When we think about Bathsheba, and how her and King David got together, not all of them had what we thought was a favorable situation. Just like, you might not have been born in a situation that seems ideal. You might not do ideal things in your situation, but it's like God is just always present. And that's something that we had learned from even the book of the story about what was the guy, Samson, just realizing that even in that mess, how God was just present and his will was going to be done. And even in these situations, so where Naomi thought that God was just punishing her, and we know that feeling of suffering, maybe not in the way that she suffers, but in a way that just feel like, God, why are you bringing me? You must have forgotten about me. But just to see what God was in the background doing, and that's why he does not need our help. God's plan is perfect, and we don't understand it, but it just always works out perfectly. Not realizing that even what Naomi was going through and the sacrifice, all of those sacrifices that had to be made for those people to be together, just for God to do what he did, which not only affected them, but it affects us, because look at what Jesus did when he died for us on that cross. And so what we saw happen through Naomi's suffering even affected us. It was for us too. So this is so much more. Count us in that genealogy, because that in itself is a part of your story as well. Any last thoughts? This was good.
Yeah, this was good.
Yeah,
Yeah. He'll use
Yes, it was.
anyone can be used.
absolutely. 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 And that is a great point. Anybody and anything. Absolutely. All right, everybody. So if there's no last thoughts, thank you, Sanan. Thank you for everybody in the chat. Thank you for y'all participation. Y'all participation been on point lately. I mean, on point, and I appreciate it. I definitely appreciate it because it makes it go easy. And we went through 4 chapters, a whole book today. And so we are going into Samuel, First Samuel, I believe it is, right? First Samuel is the next book.
Yeah.
Okay, first I'm excited. I love First Samuel, Second Samuel. I really do.
I'm excited because I've never read either of those.
Okay, well, we about to get into it, and so with some good stuff in there, and so we'll just see where the Lord takes us in discussion. All right. Does anybody want to pray us out tonight? Anybody? 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 All right. Nope. All right. I'm not gonna force you. All right. I'll say a prayer. Um, if all hearts and minds are closed, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording.